Hi guys, Tim here, Big Dog Forge. Welcome back. Good to have you in the shop. Hey, this time around we're going to do a little bit of a shorter video. I'm doing some cable Damascus. I call it snakeskin Damascus. It's kind of cool looking. We're going to go through that. We've got some viewer mail we're going to take a look at first, and a little metal that was sent to us we're going to do a little test on. Takes just a few minutes to do that, and we'll get right into the Damascus. So I love the power of video editing. You'll see what I'm talking about. And we've been a little busy in the shop putting in some new machinery, that kind of stuff, but we're full tilt on the tongs. So if you've been waiting to hear back from me, I've been offline for a little bit, but you're going to hear from me soon, and we'll get you all taken care of. Big Dog Forge. Okay guys, I appreciate it, and take a look at this and we'll talk afterwards. Thanks. See ya. Okay, Big Dog Forge got some mail. I'm gonna see what's in this thing. Ooh, and a letter. Let's see. Tim, the round stock is wrought iron, I believe, and came from Indiana. It was used on an old grain silo, big rings around the wood to hold it in place. The rectangular stock is mystery steel. I dug it up from an old sugar camp in Maryland. It throws dull orange sparks, and the grain is quite large. And when I tried forging it, it crumbled. Not sure if my heat was too high or too low. The parent bar I cut it from was over 6 foot long, so it's hard for me to imagine it was cast. Do what you can / will with it. Thanks again. For the billet. Happy hammering. Shane Losey, Springs Forge and Farrier. Well, thanks Shane. That's super awesome. Let's see what we got in the package here. Okay. Oh, this thing's big. I know it's got some moss or something on it. The grain is really big on the end of this. Looking a little like cast iron to me. We're going to have to do some tests on it and see what we come up with. Alright, what else is hiding in here? Lots of Farrier newspapers. That is definitely wrought iron. Excellent. Thank you. 2. Wow. Excellent, excellent. Always need more wrought iron. Thanks, man. Really appreciate it. Can't get enough of this kind of stuff. Thanks for the mail. I love this kind. Thanks. Alright, let's test this stuff. Alright. Spark test. Let's see what kind of sparks this thing throws. Not a whole lot of sparks, and they're kind of short and orange. And try it both sides. Same. Alright. Let's get this thing onto the drill press. When we're drilling this thing out, if it is cast iron, it'll throw small chips and a lot of black dust, which will be the carbon. And you won't get any of those long machining type peelings off this stuff. So again, that's looking a little like cast iron to me. But this test really isn't definitive. You can see the sort of black gray dust in there and the small chips. It's pretty typical of cast iron. Okay guys, the last test we're going to do on this thing is we're going to break it and take a look at the grain structure on the inside. If it's cast iron, if it's good cast iron, it should have a nice even gray grain, kind of heavy grain. It's very identifiable that way, and I have a feeling that it is. So we need to break it in half. It's kind of a big bar to be breaking, but let's give it a shot. Alright, so see that grain pattern in there? Nice gray even. What you have there is cast iron. This is desirable for people who like to melt this down and recast it into other things. This is some pretty good stuff. There you go. Well, that wasn't so bad. Alright Shane, thanks for your mail. Thanks for the wrought iron. Really appreciate that. I got a project upcoming I'm going to use that on. Alright guys, thanks. Let's get to the Damascus we're going to build today, and we'll talk in a bit. Thanks, bye. Alright guys, we're going to start with this piece of 1 1/4 inch high carbon steel cable, because I got it from cable manufacturers. It's a 2-foot piece. It was an end cut, and they just gave it to me, so freebie. And we're going to use 12 inches of this for this little project today, so we'll end up cutting it in half. I'm going to get one end of it welded up here real quick, and then we'll get it measured off and cut it where we want it. And you're going to see all that grease sort of oozing out of there as it heats up. Like I said, this is brand new, and the entire cable is just full of all sorts of sticky grease. Alright, get after this thing with a little cutoff wheel. And it's throwing some pretty good sparks there, so they told me it was a high carbon steel cable. What that means in steel cable lingo, I don't really know, but it had some pretty good sparks to it. We get this end welded up and get a handle on it. And this particular pattern welded steel, Damascus, that we're putting together today, it's got a real high potential of delamination, that kind of thing, because of the way we're going to end up with our final product. So every process that we do, we're going to end up welding probably 4 or 5 times just to make sure that we're good. Alright, you see that ooze coming out of there, all that grease. We get this thing into the fire, get that burnt off there. And it was really smoky and had the door open, the fan on. So what I do here is, you can see how those strands of the cable are separated a little bit there. So when it gets hot, just nose it straight down, tap it on the concrete floor, and it expands those. The inner core of this thing is a strand going down the center, and you need to know which way it's twisted, if it goes in the same direction of the cable or the opposite. If it goes in the opposite direction and you get it into your vise and try to twist it, that center section will expand and leave gaps in there. All of these happen to be twisted in the same direction, so I can twist it a little tighter and I'm safe. So while it was expanded, after tapping it on the floor, I fluxed it up real good and got a bunch of flux down on the inside of that. So under the power hammer here, I'm rotating it in the direction of the twist on the cable, and I'm doing that because I don't want to forge it just flat. I want to make it a solid mass, and if you just forge the cable flat, the outer strands tend to separate on you, and you'll end up with gaps and you'll lose some material there. So I welded this 4 times, I think, and then we went to forging it down into a 1-inch square bar. Of course, I scrubbed it up with a wire brush and fluxed it real well between each weld. And I kept this pretty close to welding temperature through the entire process, just because I wanted to make sure that it was nice and malleable. Alright, now that we've got it square, we're going to go ahead and notch it down the center so we can fold it over on itself, and we're only going to do this 1 time. Get it back into the forge, scrub the scale off, we're going to flux it up, get it back into the forge, let that heat up, and we're going to scrub that flux off. That'll float any extra scale away, get down into any pores, that kind of thing. It's going to help us out with our weld here. Make sure we get a good solid weld. Alright. So when I folded this thing, the bar wasn't perfectly square. It had some little rounded corners on it. So there was a little crease down either side, sort of a little valley where those corners were still a little round. But we'll deal with that in a little bit. So we're going to forge this thing down to about 1-inch square, and again we went through 4 welding cycles on this, got a couple of them out. I'm using a kiss block there, 1-inch square mild steel block. We get this thing drawn out at a 1-inch square. and we'll go ahead and grind those sides off. It's got that little valley in them. We're going to prepare this thing to cut into sections. What we're going to do is cut those sections off, and we're going to stack them on top of one another so that the strands end up being what you're looking at towards the top of this billet. They'd be sticking straight up in the same direction as the handle is. And we're going to get this welded up. We'll get it into the forge, and we're going to forge weld this in the direction that the clamp is on that thing. So it'll be standing straight up. It's a little bit tall for the forge, but it'll fit. But it won't quite fit under the power hammer. It barely does, and we're going to do an initial weld under there, but it's just little taps. It barely moves and just barely taps on it. And we'll end up welding this probably 4 more times after that by hand, simply because the power hammer is just not going to have enough power enough movement to forge it. You see that? It's a little pathetic. Get it under there, goofball. Yeah, that's just not going to do it. We need to get it onto the anvil. We'll set these welds real good with a hammer. Just scrub it up, flex it up, and get it back into the forge again. Now what we'll do is we'll remove that handle, and we'll put it on the end of that bar. We'll cut it off with a little cut-off wheel here in a bit, and then we'll be able to forge it in the opposite direction. We have to make sure these welds are good and set. We don't want any delaminations between those blocks once we start forging that out. And I've seen people do similar weldings like this, similar Damascus, sort of a mosaic style. It doesn't quite come out like this. The difference is that I leave the block a little bit wider when I start forging down on the ends of those strands. As you have the strands facing up, when you forge down on them, they distort. And you have 2 rows of them side by side because we folded it. You see that little weld on the handle there? That's to indicate which side is up that I want to forge flat for the sides of the blade. And those are the sides that the ends of the strands are sticking out. Around those corners a little bit, and we'll just keep forging it down. Now this is where you have a potential to delaminate if your forge welds aren't good, because you got all these individual strands that you're hammering straight down on, and the blocks that were segmented to make this thing, the welds between those. So if your forge welds aren't good and strong, you can get a real high chance of delamination during this process. But everything seemed to go well. And we're going to forge this down to about 3/8 of an inch thick. Straighten everything out. And we'll get her over onto the anvil and just let her sit there and cool for a while. Alright, she's cooled off. And we're going to clean up one side and one edge. Knock the scale off. Just use a soft disc to go over it real quick. I'm not going to do any fine grinding or anything like that right now. That'll be for another time. We'll get it into the etch and see what she looks like when she comes out. And I left it in there about 20-25 minutes, something like that. We're not using dissimilar metals, so I wanted to make sure I got some sort of a pattern out of it. There you go. That's my snakeskin pattern. A little like alligator skin, snake skin, something like that. I'll give you a little closer look at it here. Let me get that thing cleaned up and neutralized. There we go. And like I said, it didn't do a fine grind on it, so you can still see some grinder marks in there. And a really interesting pattern. Just looks a lot like snakeskin to me. Like I said, I've seen other people do similar things. They called it mosaic Damascus, but using dissimilar cables, things like that. This is a little different. Alright guys, there you go. The snakeskin Damascus. Let's see if we can give you a little bit better look than we did before. You can see the pattern in there. And get the light just right. Let's see if it looks better on that side, I don't know. Anyway, there's that edge. You can't really see too much in the edge. I didn't clean it up too much. There's a little bit in there. Anyway, let me know what you think. There you go. It was a lot of fun to build. I really had a good time with that. I've built things out of cable before, and a couple of knives, things like that, but never really a Damascus pattern like that, anything like that. So anyway, next time around, next couple of days, I got a video coming out, something exciting to show you guys in the shop, and we'll see you then. So thanks for tuning in, hanging out, and if you liked what you saw, why don't you give a little like button a click and share with your friends. Thanks. You guys take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.